Hello. We were supposed to take a side on what we thought about whether what we believed would happen to the unbaptized, if they would go to a limbo or if they would be going to heaven or hell. And I'm actually going to take the side of limbo, which is different than I would have a week ago. About or several years ago, my wife and I lost a baby that was about 13 weeks along, and it was very difficult. And right after that, the Theological Commission came out with what was on the class site today, that talked about how we could hope for the beatific vision for these children. It talked about God's universal salvific will, that He wills all men to be saved. The passages from Scripture about let the children come to me, that their angels see the face of my Father in heaven. Unless you become like this child, you won't enter into the kingdom. And the hope that God has done this in the past, that we know that the holy innocents who had no use of their will at that time offered themselves in sacrifice, and they were taken, that they are in heaven. We celebrate their feast. And so that there was hope, and that we should hope for them to be saved, and that there seems to be a trend that's been moving toward this in a development of doctrine. But I didn't realize is that with the idea of limbo was the biggest obstacle I had was that I can't imagine not seeing your child if someone was not baptized or they weren't, that you would be deprived of seeing them in heaven through no fault of their own. And I think my understanding now is that that natural happiness they would have is not something separate from heaven. It would be the fullness of their capacities of human nature. Beyond that, it'd be preternatural, that they would know and love God perfectly, and they would know and love God perfectly in an abstract sense. They wouldn't have the unmediated vision of God and the beatific vision, but they would be with us, and so I would see them again. And it might be more of a state that, like some of the blessed, like Peter and Paul and the Blessed Mother, would be way beyond anything that I would ever have, but there would be no jealousy, that we would be there together. So the thought of that kind of did away with the pain that was caused by the thought of limbo, that like it was a separate place that I would never see them again. And I think the main thing is just the safeguarding of the other doctrines of original sin, which is de fide, that what Adam lost, he didn't pass on to us, that there is no grace, that we are born in a state of darkness, separated from God, that we suffer the punishment of death, and without baptism, we don't have the capacity to see the beatific vision. Without, or not just baptism, but we can have the baptism of desire and the baptism of blood, but it's all oriented towards baptism and the use of the will. And infants can't do that. And so I think the problem is, if you start saying that infants could be saved, see the beatific vision, then what does baptism do? What happens with original sin? Is it really what the church teaches? If it is, then how is it that infants can be saved? And it kind of opens the door that universal salvation, well, everyone can be saved. Everyone is human. Christ is united to everybody, so maybe everybody has an implicit desire to be saved. And that's a conceivable thought. And I love Chesterton's orthodoxy, where he said that to say that all people could be saved is a conceivable remark, but it's not a battle cry. And the church always emphasizes that we're hanging by a thread for our salvation. We need to fight for it. We need to reason motivate us to go out there and evangelize. And the thought that, well, everything's going to be okay. They're all going to see God. God is loving. God is merciful. But why did God become incarnate? Why did He teach? Why did He die on a cross? Why did He found the church? Why did He give us the sacraments? Why did He send us out here? Why did He make saints who love truth so much, that help define all these doctrines? So I think to safeguard original sin, the thought of limbo is conceivable, and it makes sense out of how it could work, how God could still be just and merciful. Although I still do pray that there is a way that God does work outside the sacraments, and that they will be saved and they will experience the beatific vision. But I just think it's safer to stick with what we know and not try to speculate on what we don't know. And what we do know is that baptism is required. And so I'm sticking with limbo.